Oh, hey everybody. I'm just gonna take a moment and configure my lighting and the camera here. Whoa, that's what happens. That's why we come on a minute early. Here we go. Okay. Hey, hi. Okay. Let's get settled here then. All right. Get myself all sorted. And look at the charts. One of the things about YouTube Live as opposed to Zoom is I don't have the software yet to share my screen and show you guys the charts that I'm looking at. But sometimes the chart can be more confusing unless you're experienced and trained and know what you're looking at. So sometimes it's better to just talk about it. And so would invite anyone who has questions, comments, revelations to share those in the chat. I'm monitoring that. I'll respond directly if you're there and you want to chat. So a quick rundown of what I want to talk about today. The first main thing to say is that today the sun changes signs from the sign of Libra into Scorpio. So we're going to talk about what that means. And the other thing that's happening is the sun and the planet Mars are traveling in close conjunction within 1 degree of each other right now. So we'll talk about the significance of that. Then we'll look at some of the other transits that are coming up through the rest of this month, most notably Mercury crossing the Gandanta point between Scorpio and Sagittarius and then retrograding back across it. All that's happening sort of at the end of November and through December into the new year. We'll talk about Venus trending from Virgo into Scorpio, Virgo into Libra, and then Scorpio later, the end of the year. And I'll touch on a few other things. And then the other topic I want to address is the importance of public parts work and the power of using the internal family systems model, yes, personally, but also collectively and politically. And all of my IFS studies provide a really powerful perspective on what's happening in the world and different nations that are exiled and are other nations that are protector parts or firefighter parts, and how that can give us some insight into the collective psychology of why certain nations do this or that. And my ring light is flashing like crazy right now, isn't it? That's better. Okay. Hi. Okay. So today the sun changes signs. This is called Sankranti. And that word Sankranti talks about a transfer or a transit. And so today is is a day of liminal space, neither here nor there. It's kind of like moving day, right? Where you don't quite have access to all of your belongings and you're no longer in the old house and not yet in the new house. And you're just not at full strength in that way, are you? Where, you know that one particular book that you're looking for is in a box somewhere, but which box and where in the truck is that box? And you just don't have immediate access to it. And so this is the nature of this day, is to be gentle with yourself. Maybe you've noticed that wasn't as productive a day as you might have expected for a normal Thursday, and so that's okay. That's natural. We'll be back at it tomorrow, and there's a new solar month, and this is the month of Scorpio. So before we get into that, let's talk about the last month, when the sun has been in the sign of Libra. Now, sun in Libra is its place of debilitation, where it has the least power, the least authority. The sun, being the king of the solar system, operates with clarity and directionality and sort of autonomous power. Whereas Libra is the sign of relationship and connection and balanced scales, and you're equal to me, and so let's exchange in this fair and even way. And the problem is that the sun, the king, doesn't know how to interact with equals because there's only one king. No one in the kingdom is equal to the king. And so the image that I have for the sun in Libra is of the king without his crown, without his bodyguards, wandering around in the public marketplace trying to negotiate for the price of bread. And the king, being the king, is usually like, well, just give me the bread. But the baker doesn't know that he's the king. He's like, no, it's $5. And there's this like, then the king has to assert the power. Like, no, I'm the king, and it gets all awkward and doesn't know how to share the power necessarily. Doesn't know how to, it becomes this dominant thing or this sort of abdicating thing. When the sun is in Libra, we see this sort of two extremes of applications of power, which is to either go into the tyrant mode or the abdicant mode. The tyrant mode is like, well, I'm the king, whether you recognize it or not, I'm going to beat you up and take your bread. Or the other side is like, oh yeah, without my crown and my throne, I don't actually have any power. And so it turns into this really meek sort of energy and not able to apply the authentic power that is normally available to the king. So that's been the last 30 days or so. And so I wonder if you've noticed any of those extremes happening where your ability to negotiate has been fraught with power struggles. And maybe with your partners, it's been hard to, claim your power without overwhelming them, or to stand up for yourself and be like, hey, actually, this is a need and it's okay. And I have the power to claim that. No, okay, you're right. And so we then also see that in the world, don't we, where there are some awful things happening, and there's a dominant force and there's a meek force, and so many people and nations around the world are horrified at what's happening. Again, we can go in both directions, right? Obviously talking about what's happening in Gaza and Israel, and it's horrifying on all fronts. Israelis don't feel safe. Gazans, Palestinians are obviously not safe anywhere. And so we see these dynamics of the dominant and the sort of aggressive, and like, I'm not sure of my own power, so I must aggressively assert it and go into the tyrant mode, or calling for a ceasefire or trying to make it stop or trying to help in some way, but being feeble and unable to enact any significant influence. And even we saw Biden earlier this week said something about like, we've suggested that they be gentler or not bomb as many hospitals, but they're not listening to us. And that's a great example of Biden, the king, in effect, right? The president of the United States has that same archetypal role as the king, being feeble and being, again, we've seen it with both. I've seen him go on both sides, right? The tyrant imposing power and as well as being feeble. So that's been the last month. Now we switch into Scorpio, and this is very different. The sun actually does pretty well in Scorpio and is more happy there. And Scorpio is the sign, it's a water sign. It's a fixed water sign. And so we think of, you can think of like swamps, or I like to think of the bottom of the ocean. And it's mysterious down there. It's dark. It's full of shadows and like mysterious monsters. Maybe there's a giant squid. Maybe there's a shipwreck with the bones of old sailors. And the thing about shipwrecks is there's buried treasure. And even that I only just now thought of it, but just now on Instagram, somebody showed me footage that's just been found, like brand new footage of this ancient shipwreck. Ancient, I don't actually know the timing of it, but it's supposedly the most valuable shipwreck ever. There's a bunch of treasure down there. The number I saw was like $2 billion worth of of stuff in the shipwreck, and they've got brand new footage of it, some high-tech stuff going down there. And that's the kind of thing that we see in Scorpio, specifically high-res footage illuminating this valuable treasure which has been lost at the bottom of the ocean. That's a perfect metaphor for what the sun in Scorpio does. The sun is that brightest source of light and life and luminescence, and Scorpio is the shadows and the secrets and the underbelly, the unseen forces that move the world, that move through our own psyches. And so this month, looking forward to the support of the sun in illuminating some of the secrets, exposing to the light of day some of the information and motivations that are otherwise secreted away in the shadows. So that's the main point for what's coming up this month. And the main theme, I would say, is, so it's a great time for personal shadow work. It's a great time to go into and meditate on your hidden motivations, the parts of yourself that you would rather not admit to or acknowledge, but are nonetheless significant forces motivating the way you move through the world, and bring the light of awareness, the light of loving attention to those parts that have been exiled or abandoned or just lost at the bottom of the ocean of your own psyche. And then, of course, in the world, wouldn't it be nice to see clearly through the fog of war? And wouldn't it be nice for the sun to burn through some of the confusion and reveal the true motivations, the true powers at play, so that we can at least see clearly who's who, instead of all the shadow stuff and the propaganda and the confusion of what's what and who's who and who did what to who when. And it can be very confusing when there are aggressive propaganda campaigns crossing, and everything sort of gets pushed into the shadows, and that's where the most awful shit happens, right? So Sun and Scorpio bringing the light of awareness, the light of attention into the dark depths. So it's scary, right? To go into the depths is dangerous. Again, it's unknown. There's a lot of pressure down there. Thinking about the bottom of the ocean, right? The further down you go, the more pressurized it gets, and you got to move carefully. You got to bring your own light, and there's all sorts of monsters down there. It's dangerous and scary, but the promise is, if you have the courage to go down there, there's treasure that you can bring back to the surface and be like, aha, this is what I found. This is the secret treasure that's been buried in the bottom of my psyche, or that's been sort of secretly motivating world events. So that's that part. The other piece of that is that Mars is right there with the sun right now. Let me just adjust my chart here so I can see the exact. Yeah, they are both within 1 degree. They both moved into Scorpio today, and they're right close to each other, and they'll be that close until, let's just check some dates. Yeah, until the 23rd of November. So we got another week of those two. 22nd. Yeah, until the 22nd. So first of all, Mars is the ruler of Scorpio. So being in close conjunction, there's this, a lot of times when a planet is very, very close to the sun, its influence and its ability to express itself is weakened, right? When you look for Mars in the sky right now, you're not going to be able to see it because it's right next to the sun, and you're just staring into the sun, and the light of the sun is all that you can see. So any planet that's too close to the sun sort of gets burnt up and fried, and it's sort of like at the end of a day on the beach sitting in the sun, you haven't been doing anything, you've just been laying there, but you're exhausted, right? And you think of like a plant that wilts in the light and heat of the sun. That's kind of what it does to the planets. However, when it's within 1 degree, this is more of a Western astrology concept, but I've found that it really works in practice when it's really, really precise. It's sort of like looking through the keyhole, and the light of the sun sort of like goes through the planet and amplifies it and creates this really burning clarity of what that planet is all about. And so, of course, Mars is about using strength to create safety. Mars, in a lot of ways, is our survival mechanism. It's the part of us that is willing to fight to survive or fight to preserve that which we consider sacred, life being the primary sacred thing. And so sure enough, we have a lot of people fighting for survival on all sides. I believe that everybody involved in all the global wars, whether we're talking about Ukraine, whether we're talking about the Congo, Sudan, there's all sorts of big wars happening. And this, the sun is the king, Mars is the sort of 5-star general running the military. And so when those two get together, they're in the war room, they're in the Pentagon, and they've got their fingers on the button, right? And that's the way they know how to operate. When the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, doesn't it? So that's the power, that's the motivation, that's the scene that's happening. Is the king and the head of the military are in close cahoots and battling for power a little bit, but also amplifying each other's power and goading each other on and exacerbating their cruel influences. Both of them are considered cruel planets. Now, all planets are divine forces who are acting in service of our personal and collective evolution. It just depends on what type of lessons or the flavor of the lesson they offer, right? So planets like Venus and Jupiter are considered gentle, kind planets. And so they bring us lessons through pleasure and like wise teachings and teachers. And it's illuminating. It's like, oh, yes, this lesson is so enlivening and life affirming. Whereas Mars teaches us through breaking stuff. And the sun is sattvic in terms of it being like pure and sort of divine, but it's also cruel because the sun doesn't really care whether you are, having a daiquiri on the beach or dying of thirst in the desert. The sun is the sun is the sun, and it's going to burn. And so, you may be getting a tan, you may be being suffocated by or dying of thirst in the desert. Sun is the same. So all that is just amplifying the willingness for violence is what that does. Mars is the willingness to break things, and sometimes it's appropriate to break things. Sometimes that is the right thing to do, is to, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a business strategy, even where it's like, okay, hey, this isn't working, let's dismantle it or smash it and create a new plan, right? If you want to, I'm imagining like an old shed that's falling apart in your backyard. In order to build a new shed or even like a accessory dwelling unit, first you got to raise that old shed and deconstruct it with a sledgehammer or a bulldozer, right? That's the sort of thing that Mars is good for. But then also Mars is associated with rage, anger, frustration, resentment, these sort of red-colored emotions that sometimes destroy things that don't need destroying. Mars is very much it's a tamasic planet. Therefore, it's associated with our limbic brain, that sort of reptile brain that just knows that I need to fight for survival. And if it's you or me, I'm going to fight to make sure that it's me. And again, we see that playing out all over the world, don't we? And authority figures, the sun, being willing to use violence to, in this case, well, because it's been in Libra up to now, it's because of the lack of ability to communicate clearly and negotiate, which the Libra wants to do, because that's not really the sun's way. Mars isn't super good at that either. The response has been violence and the willingness to use force as the negotiating tool, as opposed to any kind of diplomacy or conversation or empathy and understanding, which again is the Libra way, is like, hey, you're a person, I'm a person, let's talk about it, let's meet somewhere in the middle. That's not what's been happening, is it? So there's hope for that to change as the underbelly of the situation is revealed, and as Mars is more at home in its own sign and is operating with a greater level of intelligence that about what actually needs to be destroyed, because there are certain structures or aspects of the international order that are fixed in place that are keeping the situation as dangerous as it is. And so it could be helpful to deconstruct some of those structures and put something new in place to use our strength and power to create safety and protect that which is sacred instead of just destroying stuff, right? So that's Sun and Mars. That's the gist of it. Is that making sense? I'd invite anyone to throw a comment a question in the comment or a comment in the comments. Chat with me. Let me know if that's making any sense to you, if I'm way off base in your experience, or perhaps you've been experiencing some of that yourself. What else? Right, let's talk about Mercury, because Mercury is also right there in Scorpio. It's a little bit further along, but it's right now we've got 3 planets in Scorpio. So there's a lot of emphasis there. And so that actually helps us do research. And Mars is that intellectual one who's just curious. And so Mercury in Scorpio is really good at getting to the bottom of things and being studying the map, doing the sonar or the radar map of the bottom of the ocean. That's a very Mercury thing. And so it's a great time to be doing your research and staying as neutral as possible. This is the quality of Mercury that we love, is that it's purely curious. It's not taking sides. It's looking at facts. It wants to collect as much data as possible. So it's a great time to be collecting data. There's, in activist circles, there's this idea that silence is complicity, and sometimes that's true. Silence is also a place of learning, a place of absorbing, a place of being impacted, of letting the information percolate instead of going to that more Martian way. It's like information response, right? Fire, ready, aim. Mercury is much more like, cool, let's do another lap. Let's let that information percolate. I don't know what it all means yet. I haven't connected all the dots yet. So let's collect more data points, like more pixels that create a greater resolution on your screen of awareness. So Mercury is there until November 24th. Until November 26th, but it's November 24th, which I believe is Thanksgiving Day, when Mercury goes into Gandanta, which is the couple degrees right before that Gandanta point between Scorpio and Sagittarius. And if you've been following me for a while, you've heard me talk a lot about Gandanta points, where a water sign meets a fire sign. And this is a very tumultuous transformational zone of the zodiac, where 2 things that are not alike meet and they do not merge. Right, all the other signs sort of like flow in, and the boundary between them is a little bit nebulous or smooth. Whereas where Scorpio and Sagittarius meet, it's 2 unlike things coming together, and there's a clear division between them. So I'm thinking of like in a canyon or in a glacier. You can mostly like walk around all the holes, but sometimes there's just a deep divide that you have to jump across, and it's dangerous. So that's where Mercury is going to be really until the end of the year, until January 7th, actually, because Mercury is going to cross into Sagittarius on the 26th of November, then 2 weeks later goes retrograde on the 13th of December. Then it's the 28th of December when Mercury crosses back across that Gandanta point, then turns direct on the 2nd of January, and finally crosses the Gandanta point again on the 7th of January. So for the next almost 2 months, Mercury's doing this dance across the Gandanta point. And so if you see, like one of the things that you might see is like drastic changes in messaging from people or organizations or nation states, where one day it's one thing, and then Mercury crosses the Gandanta point, and oh no, these are the facts. And then it crosses again, no, these are the facts. And it's sort of bipolar in a way. It's water, it's fire, it's water, it's fire. And so this is what's happening with Mercury for the next 2 months. And so do I have any advice for that? Geez. I would, it's one of those things where the neutrality of it is really important. And so when, especially when Mercury enters Sagittarius, so that's happening November 26th and will be there until December 28th. So you got a month where Mercury's in Sagittarius, even though it's retrograde about half that time. That is a time to be questioning your religious beliefs. Sagittarius is all about religion and the capital T truth, and capital K knowledge, and the one truth. Sagittarius knows that there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. And this is the quality of Jupiter, where there is the wisdom, and it's all encompassing and sort of unquestionable. Whereas Mercury, on the opposite side of that spectrum, is just curious. Like, I wonder if it's like that. I wonder if it's like this. Let's learn more. And so that period of time is going to be very, very helpful to cultivate that attitude of curiosity and set aside any value judgments or sort of religious fundamentalism, which is also sort of like the shadow side of Sagittarius, is that fundamentalist approach to things where like, I know what's right and you can't tell me otherwise. And again, that quality can be a powerful motivator and help you stay on the path just in spite of many obstacles or naysayers. But it can also lead to fundamentalism, where there's good evidence or important alternate perspectives that you're blind to because of how convinced you are that this is the right way. And so for all of us, no matter how sure you are that you're correct, do a little bit of extra research, put on your academic brain, read all sorts of content, seek out different documentaries, and gather as many facts, as many data points as you can to create a much more detailed picture, so that when you connect the dots, it's a more precise picture of reality, as opposed to like, well, I've got these 4 dots and that makes a circle, like kind of. So that's Mercury's vibe. Okay. We've got Venus. Venus is currently in the sign of Virgo, which is also where it's debilitated. And the way we can think about that is, I was thinking like a Monet painting, where if you go up and study a Monet painting up close and analyze it and pick apart, it's like, well, he left a brush stroke there. It's like, well, that's kind of the point. But if you look at it from 20 feet away, it's like, oh, this is the most beautiful garden, and the feeling of it is so deeply communicated. That's the beauty that Venus wants to express, whereas Virgo is much more like analytical and breaking it apart into systems thinking. And again, Virgo is genius in so many ways. But if you are nitpicking your loved one, that's not a very pleasurable experience of love, is it? So when Venus is in Virgo, one of the things I like to do is sort of like get off on color coding your calendar, or like I've been reorganizing a lot of my files and making sure that all of my old photos are labeled and organized in places where I can find them, and this sort of thing, and finding the beauty in the systematic approach and the pleasure in everything being really well organized and having your systems in place. So that's sort of like, for me, the workaround of Venus debilitated in Virgo. And come November 29th, Venus will leave Virgo and enter its own sign of Libra, where Venus is much, much more comfortable and brings us into that relational space. So it's after the 29th that there's a little more hope for the vibe of love to permeate. There's a little more hope for some negotiations, some diplomacy happening, some recognition of equal right to live and thrive, and the sense of, okay, again, you're a person, I'm a person, let's find a way to coexist in a pleasurable way for all involved. So that's there's some hope for that. November 29th, and then until Venus enters Scorpio, December 25th. Anything else to say about that? Venus in Libra is a beautiful time generally for your relationships, your romantic relationships. It's a time, lots of times people are talking about, oh, winter's coming. People are getting into relationships, so they have someone to snuggle with over the winter, whereas then, spring, summer comes and everybody's breaking up because they want to go play. And there's some legitimacy to that, and we can interpret that through the lens of Venus moving into Libra, because the planet of love and relationships is in its own sign, the natural 7th house of love and relationships. So be watching out for the tendency to want to commit, or it's a beautiful thing to negotiate and be in conversation with your partner as an equal. And the pitfalls of that can be to be a little bit too nice, or to be negotiating with someone who's not negotiating with you, right? Yeah, Sierra, I see your comment. Yeah, November 29th until December 25th is Venus in Libra. Because if you're negotiating and it's like, okay, I want things to be equal and reciprocal, and in order to do that, I'm willing to give you this, and depending who you're negotiating with, they may be like, cool, yeah, I want that, I'll take that. And then Venus in Libra is like, well, okay, it must not be equal then. I'll give you this too. And it's like, yeah, cool, I'll take that too. And so we want to make sure that it's actually balanced, it's actually reciprocal, there's actually a mutuality to the negotiations, as opposed to a giver and a taker. And sometimes Libra has trouble with those boundaries, because the desire to connect and be relational is so strong that it isn't always clear whether the scales are balanced. So that's Venus Libra. Okay, a couple other notes here. Rahu is continuing its ingress into Pisces. It was just a couple weeks ago, end of October, that Rahu left Aries after 18 months there. This last eclipse cycle was the end of that, and Rahu is now in the sign of Pisces for the next 18 months, but Rahu's still in Gandanta. So another Gandanta point, there are 3 in the zodiac. So we talked about the one between Scorpio and Sagittarius. Rahu has crossed the Gandanta point between Pisces and Aries, but Rahu always moves retrograde. So it's going from Aries backwards into Pisces. And so we can see when Rahu changes signs, it tends to signify a major shift in collective priorities. So people all around the world, whether they're conscious of it or not, the eclipses are now going to be happening in different signs. And that really does signal a shift in priorities. And, Aries, ruled by Mars, aggressive on the selfish side of things, but impulsive and spontaneous. And I want that, I'm going for it, sort of thing. Again, fire, ready, aim kind of energy. And whereas Pisces is the sign of the poet, mystic, abstract, metaphorical thinking, more daydreamy and imagining what the heavenly realms must be like, and that sort of wafty, wishy-washy has a negative connotation to it, but doesn't. But Pisces is an oceanic sign. It's less about the individual waves or even the islands. It's the whole ocean, and so my hope, my prayer for these coming 18 months would be that our collective focus moves us in the direction of understanding that there really is only one ocean on the planet, right? Different tides, different areas of it, but ultimately it's all woven together. there's only one of us here, right? There's only one race on the planet, and that's the human race. And there's only one Earth. We are all crew on spaceship Earth. And so that sort of unity consciousness is not just a new age truism. It really is the deeper or expansive reality of the situation. And Pisces helps us to attune to that reality and then take hopefully practical action based on that awareness. But we're still in the transition zone, right? Still, a little bit treacherous, still with the residue of Aries, still not fully established in Pisces. So that's going to take another couple weeks, another month or so. Let me see if I can get more accurate with that. It's going to be into 2024. It's mid-January that Rahu is firmly established in Pisces. Okay, the last note is that Jupiter remains retrograde in the sign of Aries and will be so until the 30th of December. And when Jupiter's retrograde, the key word is stubborn. And this is this quality similar to what I described before about like knowing I'm right. You can't tell me otherwise. I don't care how much information or facts are against me. I know I'm right just because I know it, right? And so this is a more subtle tendency, but in the sign of Aries, it shows the willingness to fight for your beliefs and be a little bit stubborn about those beliefs and be less willing to hear new information. And even if you were willing to hear new information, it's probably too late because Aries is so impulsive that your worldview is what it is, and you're feeling extra stubborn about it right now. And then the stimulus arose, and you acted just like that. And so just be wary of that, especially when you're having conversations with family, loved ones, anyone on the internet. Just notice if you're being stubborn. And sometimes stubbornness is good. Again, sometimes stubbornness is what helps you break through a barrier that's in your way. Sometimes stubbornness can help you accomplish a complex task just by sticking to it. But especially in these tender transitional times that we're living in as a planet, I'm suspicious of anyone who's too sure of what it is, right? There's so much going on that anyone who's 100% convinced that they have the right answer and that it's simple in their minds, that's a little bit of a red flag for me. So be wary in your own mind, in your own responses if you're being stubborn. And if you're going to choose to be stubborn, fine. Hopefully don't be violent about it. And do your best to be open, and that review of your religious beliefs. And religion doesn't have to be like specifically a spiritual tradition. We all have religious type beliefs that are the pillars of our worldview. And so to investigate what those are, first of all, if you don't already know what they are, and then to use this Mercury cycle and this Jupiter retrograde period to be in a review period. Are your teachers still the right teacher for you? Are the teachings that you follow still appropriate and working for you? Or do they need a little bit of augmentation, a little bit of extra study, a little bit of this goes in the archive, here's where I'm going, and the new year will be a great time to embark on a new course of study, which is great because I'm launching a year-long program in internal family solar systems in the new year. So if you want to study how to apply internal parts work using astrological archetypes, both for your own self-healing and personal evolution, as well as for all of you holistic healthcare providers, mental health specialists, therapists, coaches. These are powerful tools for you to implement in your clinical practice and help your clients recognize the unconscious patterns that are moving them and motivating them, and to create a more harmonious conversation between those internal parts by using the astrological archetypes to understand, okay, here's a Mars part, here's a Venus part, and they can have a more friendly conversation than perhaps they've been having. So that's launching in January. Great time to have a new teacher launch on a new course of study. And so with that in mind, one of the concepts of internal family systems is the three sort of general categories of parts. Right? And so within the multiplicity of our own psyches, again, in the IFS paradigm, it's perfectly healthy to understand that your mind is multiple. Your psyche is one whole thing, just like your body is one whole organism composed of many individual parts. You've got bones and ligaments and organs and muscle tissue. Just so is your psyche, one whole thing composed of many constituent parts. And so it's perfectly healthy to have a variety of different voices in your head. And the game, or the challenge, is to negotiate between them and recognize what each part wants and needs, and know when a part has hijacked and is leading the way, when in fact, ideally, the capital S self is the one leading the way. And so we can get deeper into that. But there are three basic categories into which we can organize different parts. And those are protectors, firefighters, and exiles. And protectors, also known as managers, are the ones who try to keep everything in order, try to keep chaos at bay, and show up often as inner critics. This sort of thing where, like, gotta keep everything organized, otherwise everything's gonna fall apart, right? And the chaos generally rises in the form of exiles, these parts of ourselves that are deemed unacceptable or dangerous or just problematic. And so we pretend they don't exist, or we just say, hey, that's not okay, you go over here, and we imprison them in the shadow realm of our psyche, so that the only way that they can get any recognition is to break through those gates and to come out in weird ways, sort of like trying to hold a balloon underwater, and eventually like sneaks out and pops up over here, right? So exiles sometimes show up as Freudian slips. They show up as nightmares. They show up in unconscious motivations. They can show up as addictive behaviors. Like, I consciously know that I want to do this, but then I do this totally other thing. I want a calm, loving relationship. Sabotage, right? That's usually the energy of an exiled part. And when that exile energy arises, the firefighter jumps in to put out the fire. And that's actually where the addictive thing comes in, where this feeling or this action that's really uncomfortable and unacceptable shows up. How do we put that out as quickly as possible? Cool, like, I'm gonna go get wasted, or I'm gonna eat until I fall asleep just to smother it. And firefighter, if a building's on fire, that firefighter is not too worried about preserving the photo album. They've got the hose in there, and they're the walls of the building might get destroyed, but the fire will get put out, right? And so that's the firefighter energy, is it doesn't really have much concern for the health, wellness of the self or the people around, right? It's like, see this in relationships. When somebody gets threatened or an exile part shows up, or the relationship triggers something, the firefighter comes out as yelling or avoidance or some sort of problematic behavior. And the firefighter doesn't care that it's problematic, because it'll do whatever is necessary to rescue the psyche from its perceived danger. And so this goes around and around. And hopefully that resonates and makes sense to you in your own life, and you have some experience of navigating between these parts. But we also see it playing out on the international stage. And one of the things that Dick Schwartz, the founder of IFS, talks about is how the harder you repress an exile, the harder they fight back. And the manager, controller, protector part is justifiably afraid of what the exile might do, because there's a history of evidence of that exile, farting at a funeral, or standing up in the middle of a wedding to do doing something that's actually inappropriate, or puts the survival or acceptance of the person in danger. And so the manager is perfectly justified in being afraid of the exile and doing its job of keeping it at bay, keeping the prison door locked. And so without the conscious reintegration and compassionate negotiation to harmonize protectors and exiles and reintroduce exiles into the community of your psyche, this cycle is going to go on and on, right? Where the repressed exile is going to do terrorist acts just to get some sort of attention. Just like we see little kids, if they're not getting attention, they'll act out and do some problematic behavior just to get the attention. Any attention is better than none. And then what happens? Then you punish them more, and they're more likely to do it again. And this cycle continues, and you're perfectly justified in punishing them. But then it's not actually solving the problem. It's actually just keeping the loop going. And maybe you can see where I'm going with this in terms of what's happening in the Middle East, where if you were to name the most exiled nation, the most exiled people on the planet in the collective psyche, I mean, the Palestinian people would have to be near the top of the list, wouldn't they? If any group of people has been abandoned by the global community and kept imprisoned and locked away and told they're bad and evil and inappropriate, and that it would be better if they just didn't exist, that's the Palestinian people. And of course, the protector, the manager part, which in this case takes the form of the Israeli state government, is perfectly justified in being afraid. And look at all the terrorist attacks that have happened, and look at the people killed, and look at how Hamas claims to want the end of Israel, right? They're perfectly justified in punishing them and being brutal with them and locking them away. And then of course, when the exile does break through the gates of consciousness and make itself known and make a splash and be a problem, because that's the only way they're going to get any attention, which is the history, right? Everybody forgets about the Palestinians until there's some new terrorist attack, and then everybody is talking about the issue again. And everybody, that's a generalization. Forgive me, I'm clumsy. But so when there's a terrorist attack, then the firefighter parts come in, and there's a new, they got to mow the lawn, and fresh round of bombings and killings and new settlements and this sort of thing. That's the firefighter part, who sort of doesn't care about the collateral damage, which is what's happening right now. What is happening in Gaza right now is full-on Israeli firefighter response. They don't seem to care about the damage they're doing to Gaza, to the millions of displaced people, to the thousands of people who have been killed, to the thousands of children who are dead, to their international reputation, right? They don't seem to care about the damage they're doing even to themselves, the way an addict doesn't care what the alcohol is doing to their body, because that's the short-term solution that seems to be quelling the suffering or tamping down that exiled feeling or part that is unacceptable. And so it goes, right? And then so the exiled part is all the more suppressed and repressed. And like any living entity, the more it's repressed, the more it fights back. And so here we go around and around and around. And so this, for me, is the importance of public parts work, of internal family systems as a political approach, understanding nations as whole beings. That, again, it's the cosmos is designed and operates with similar structures from the micro to the macro, right? the individual cells in my body compose the whole that is me. I am one cell in the whole that is the United States, for example. The United States is one cell in the whole that is all the nations on the planet. The planet is one cell in the whole that is the solar system, and it sort of like fractalizes out like that, and all the way down to the subatomic level. And so if we can understand that, we can apply systems thinking to every level. And this is the part that I just don't see happening, because the IFS process on an individual level begins with curiosity and compassion. It presumes that there are no bad parts. Every part has some benevolent motivation, is trying to help in some way, even if its help is not helpful, even if its help is super problematic. On an internal level, these exiled parts actually contain superpowers, and they contain the secret key to your liberation and your ability to finally thrive and actually have the healthy relationship without sabotaging it, right? And so it has to start with curiosity, compassion, empathy, and this sense of welcoming home that one who's been exiled for how many decades or centuries or millennia. And that's the part that just doesn't, well, it's obviously not happening. And the part that brings despair in me is that it doesn't seem possible even. But again, there's always hope. Things can change really, really quickly. And so that's the, I think that's about what I came to say in terms of political parts work. And one thing to say is, if you want to learn more about internal family systems, if you want to learn more about internal family solar systems, which is my approach to integrating astrological counseling into the evidence-based approach to therapeutic parts work that is internal family systems, then I've got a hour-long presentation that provides a detailed summary of the principles and practical applications of this modality that's available. If you go to vedadave.com/IFSS, there's just, give me your email address and I'll send you the video recording and the PDF notes of this. For me, it's really exciting. It's the topic of my doctoral thesis. I'm all but dissertation on a doctorate in divinity, and I'm finally getting around to finishing that paper. But this presentation is the summary of that effort, and it includes a case study, so you can see how we look at an astrology chart and weave it in with the IFS model. And this case study is really powerful, really illuminating for this person. And then, of course, if you want to be a case study, I would invite you to book a consultation, and we can see what your chart says about your parts. Really, your astrology chart is a map of parts, right? We can see how they're inclined to interact with each other. So the promise of this is that it shortcuts a lot of the preliminary work of IFS, which, I mean, sometimes you don't want to shortcut it and you can only go as fast as the system it allows. But it's really helpful, instead of just going internally and sort of pawing around looking for a part, we can get a pretty good map of, okay, this part, it relates to this part that way. And we can get a sense of, where do we need to go first? Which parts are most likely causing the biggest problems in what areas of life, and we can be really precise right away. And it's a powerful thing. So check it out, vedadave.com/IFSS. And that's about it for this evening. May it be of benefit. If you have questions, comments, concerns, enthusiasm, revelations to share, please send me a note. I'm dave@vedadave.com. You can find me on Instagram @AyurvedaDave. Thanks, Tina. Glad you're here. Thanks, Sierra. Appreciate you. And let me know what you think about YouTube Live. Zoom calls are useful in some ways and not others. YouTube is sort of fun, but it's very much like me monologuing and less conversational, but maybe that's preferable. One thing we know about me is I can keep on talking ad infinitum, isn't it? Hey, Kelsey, thanks for being here. So yeah, send me a note. Look forward to hearing from all of you. And I hope you have a beautiful rest of your evening, rest of your day, wherever you may be in the world. And peace, peace, peace. Yeah. Praying, and prayer in action, right? Don't let it just be prayers. Despair is not solidarity. Hopelessness is not allyship. So if you have motivation, if you see something that needs doing that can be supportive to others, go for it. Please, 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 please. Okay, sending love to all y'all. See you soon.